Harry's Wife. Part 100.11. The Cut. I am a princess. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The interview appeared in The Cut, a laughable piece of self-promotion which no doubt the interviewer found immensely entertaining, taking the piss out of Harry's wife. Nevertheless, the reading of this, many people have already accessed it, but you haven't had the forensic takedown of it, seen through the prism of narcissism, courtesy of your glorious narrator. Therefore, I'm going to explain the constituent parts of it to you. I'm not going to read through the entire thing. It's tedious enough having to review it oneself without having to reread it. And moreover, I wouldn't want you all to suddenly become nauseous. I want you to listen to me, not collapse, spewing your guts up. That would be no good. Wasted fuel. Anyway, settle back. AirPods in, headphones on, volume turned up, and I'll take you to selected parts and explain what's really going on. We commence with this extract. Harry's wife's journey from deal or no deal suitcase girl to princess had the makings of a fairy tale, or at the very least a stellar romantic comedy, but it took almost no time to turn into an extraction plot from a mid-90s political thriller. This, of course, makes it all far more interesting than it actually is. It's certainly interesting from the perspective of explaining narcissism, but of and in itself, her life is dull, and her behaviour is dull, save when the narcissism explained. The seemingly storybook wedding in 2018 was followed by a year of clandestine observations and conversations with the 1,200-year-old institution dubbed the Firm, during which the couple asked for help in relieving Harry's wife's declining mental health. Bringing up the past, revision of history, pity play. When those talks went nowhere, there were even more clandestine conversations with a network of rich and powerful friends that led to an escape to Vancouver Island for a 6-week holiday that turned into something far more permanent. It was there the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Harry and Harry's wife, made a surprise announcement that they would be stepping back from their roles as senior members of the royal family in an Instagram post so full of hidden context and meaning that MI6 could use it for message decoding training. What a load of excrement that is. Not full of hidden meaning in the slightest. This, of course, is all of the deluded grandiosity of Harry's wife, as I mentioned in an earlier part, that there is in essence a soundtrack that plays whenever she does anything. Wherever she goes, she thinks she's in some kind of film. The interview continues by some spiel about Montecito, etc., and then Tyler Perry enters the fray, apparently reaching out. And Harry's wife makes mention where she states that apparently Perry told Harry's wife to call if she ever needed support or advice. It took her a long time to do so, she admits. But once she did, she found herself telling him every detail of their situation in Canada. Sometimes you can tell your life story to a stranger on a plane as opposed to some of the people that are closest to you, she says. Of course, Harry's wife may well do that. No boundary recognition, a sense of entitlement to talk about herself to no matter who's listening, who may well be thinking, why are you telling me about all your problems? I don't know even the fuck you are. And, of course, a lack of accountability. But isn't it interesting that supposedly she was so suicidal that she couldn't bring herself to, of course, contact mental health professionals, that she seems so readily able to speak to a stranger about the difficulties, but doesn't appear to have done anything in that regard when she supposedly had the suicidal ideation. Once again, her narcissism fucks it up for her, that When she says something then, she will later say something to contradict herself, because she can't keep a story straight, because her narcissism doesn't need to. It operates, if you will, hand to mouth. It functions in the moment. The interviewer then goes on about Perry offering one of his houses, essentially of some kind of bolt hole, and then we move on to the Oprah bombshell interview. The article explains, they took part in an interview special with their neighbour and collaborator Oprah Winfrey that attracted 17 million viewers. Yes, bringing up the past once again. An interview that took place some 18 months ago has to be regurgitated once again. Why? Because Harry's wife has nothing interesting to tell us. She's anodyne, industrial beige, magnolia. Over the course of the 85-minute special, the interview tells us, she dropped bombshells. Baby, about Charles not taking Harry's phone calls, about palace conversations where a still unnamed someone kvetched over how dark Archie's skin would be. Well, Tom Baer clarified that for us. She clarified that it was Kate Middleton who made her cry over flower girl dresses, not vice versa, as the tabloids had previously reported. Bombshells. And the firm, leaks and relocations, racism against babies. This was definitely not a fairy tale, but revealing all of it was their way of setting fire to a narrative they didn't control and letting a new one emerge. Well, all this is doing is bringing up the past once again, because once it appears on Harry's wife's radar, she has to assert control. She can't bury anything dead. She can't let it go. So she will bring up again and again and again the issue of the alleged racism, even though it's a revision of history. She will bring up again and again and again the suggestion that it was Kate Middleton that made her cry, pity play, revision of history, triangulation, and so on and so forth. The article then goes on praising her with regard to her appearance, where she's apparently in an entryway, arms wrapped around a black Labrador. It's all rather tedious and boring. But then our next section from the interview tells us, the Montecito house is the kind of big that startles you into remembering that unimaginable wealth is actually someone's daily reality. So much so for somebody being relatable. It evokes a classic Tuscan villa, a Napa vineyard, and a manicured Beverly Hills country club, decorated with careful, considered coastal tones for a casual air, the home equivalent of billionaires dressing down in denim. In a sense, that seems to me to be a bit of a smackdown with regard to the property to suggest that it's dressing down billionaires, and actually might be a backhanded compliment provided by the author of this article. It continues, finding a house to start their new life wasn't easy. Harry's wife tells me, we were looking in this area. She's referring to Montecito, the Tony, I think mean Pitini, the tiny beachside hamlet north of Los Angeles, and this house kept popping up online in searches. At first, they'd resisted going to visit, and also Harry's wife's clearly not familiar with the concept of cookies. We didn't have jobs. We still fucking don't. So we just were not going to come and see this house. It wasn't possible. It's like when I was younger and you're window shopping. It's like, I don't want to go and look at all the things that I can't afford. That doesn't feel good. How utterly humbled we all are when confronted with a depressingly aspirational Zillow hunt. And again, of course, this appears to be taking the piss out of Harry's wife by referencing the fact that you're looking at multi-million-dollar properties while much of the world can't afford to eat, and you're banging on about how it doesn't make you feel good. Once again demonstrating the self-obsessed nature of Harry's wife, how all she can ever do is focus upon herself, that all she ever does is bemoan her own status because she's a permanent victim. Apparently they toured it, fell in love with it, and apparently because they've got income, they were able to purchase it. Partway through the interview, we're told this. Harry's wife stops to point out two massive Dr. Seussian palm trees, dead centre on a lawn so verdant it's better not to consider the water bill. Another little dig there, the indulgences of the Sussexes, whereby drought conditions prevail, yet they're spunking loads of water on their garden. Lack of emotional empathy, so much for their environmental credentials, hypocrisy, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability. One of the first things my husband saw when we walked around the house was those 2 palm trees, she coos. See how they're connected at the bottom? He goes, my love, it's us. And now every day when Archie goes by us, he says, hi mama, hi papa. What a nauseating example. And the fact is, you could well imagine, though, the dim wit of the Prince of Pancakes go, oh, look, those 2 trees, they're us, because essentially they're joined at the hip, which is basically what I am to you, because you've changed me to you, haven't you? Oh, God, I'm so depressed, I want to go home and see William. The fact is that she doesn't realise that by relating this anecdote, which she thinks shows how inextricably linked they are and how loved they are, that anybody with a functioning brain cell looks at it and says, well, quite simply, you've tied him to you. The poor chap can't escape. And if you think that the palm trees demonstrate love, well, you're even more deluded than we first thought. The article goes on talking about the chicken coop and how they purchased it for $14.65 million and that they did everything to get it. And then states, even if she and Harry have stepped back from their royal duties, Harry's wife is still very aware that people see her as a princess, only in her own fucking deluded mind. It's important to be thoughtful about it because, even with the Oprah interview, I was conscious of the fact that there are little girls that I meet, and they're just like, oh my God, it's a real-life princess. Again, that shows the rampant ego driven by her narcissism, whereby she thinks that every little girl that sees her thinks, oh my God, it's a real-life princess. First of all, although she's strictly speaking, she's Princess Henry, nobody actually refers to her as a princess, but that doesn't matter, because once again, in her own deluded mind, that is what she is, and therefore, since she determines it to be, it must be so. That is the way of the narcissist. Furthermore, it's akin to the way that Harry's wife probably thinks that every man wants to shag her. Narcissists, especially those of a mid-range variety, invariably think that all the people that talk to them are madly in love with them, want to have sex with them, and are completely infatuated with them. Harry's wife is no different. She'll have thought that Prince William had eyes for her when, of course, he only had eyes for his scarf. She will have thought, for instance, that Prince Charles wanted to slip her a crippler, and I'm surprised that she didn't pop up and perhaps try and felch him. But nevertheless, she goes around thinking that every man wants to bang her and that every little girl wants to be her. This is the deluded nature of her self-obsessed narcissism. But there's more. I just look at all of them and think, you have the power within you to create a life greater than any fairy tale you've ever read. I don't mean that in terms of you can marry a prince one day. I mean you can find love. You can find happiness. You can be up against what could feel like the greatest obstacle, and then you can find happiness again. Yes. All of her life-affirming, sugar-coated nonsense that she spouts, driven by her narcissism once again. Reference is made, of course, to Harry, or calling him H, or my love, objectification, use of pet name. And Harry does make an appearance, and the interviewer wonders what she did actually call him. It's not particularly interesting, so I'm not going to read it out. All he talks about is fixing some pipes, and it's a whole story in itself. Thanks for that, Harry. You can exit stage left. Another section, however, that's worth our attention states as follows. The day before, while Harry's wife was on the photo shoot for this issue, Harry had been left to his own devices. He tells me, you were gone for like 10 hours yesterday. He marvels to his wife. Tell her the first thing you said when you got back last night, he says, turning to me. She said, I'm not a model. I was like, no, you are. Of course you can be a model. And she says, like, I'm a mom. And it's like, you can be both, Harry says, earning himself so many points. Poor bastard. He's there having to kowtow and compliment her rather shamelessly in front of a visitor. Of course, she's showing false modesty. I'm not a model when she thinks that she is, notwithstanding her SpongeBob SquarePants body and chicken legs, and, of course, aging frame. She believes that she is absolutely irresistibly gorgeous. And she believes that she's a model. But having the recollection of this particular anecdote is just a further point of triangulation and bringing up the immediate past for the purpose of assertion of control over Harry in the moment and, of course, in dealing with the interviewer. The interview then goes on talking about the creation of Archewell and their sort of working day, and there's reference made that there's been very little consumable content out of Archewell so far, and impatience around the Netflix documentary. Again, it's all fairly standard stuff, which doesn't tell us anything new or is of particular interest. And again, one has more important things than to necessarily weigh through everything that this vapid individual has to state. But of course, it shows us yet more aspects of the narcissistic dynamic, and it shows the height of her delusion, the self-obsession, and the necessity throughout of demonstrating that she's amazing, that she's beautiful, that everybody looks up to her, and of course, this maintenance of the fact that she's a princess, and you better not forget it, notwithstanding the fact that she maintains that she doesn't really want anything to do with the royal family, yet again keeps making mention of the fact that she's a princess. She wants to have her cake and eat it. And of course, once again, it's a demonstration of her hypocrisy. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.